Cover 2 podcast coming at you live from the OC Rock Radio Studios at Saddleback College. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we have a good podcast, Jared. This is the last normal podcast we're going to have for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
We're doing our NCAA March Madness predictions podcast next week, and then we're taking a 2-week break as Jared hauls off to Africa for a couple weeks. So this is the last normal podcast. We're going to be able to really talk about all the sports. So we're going to dive into a lot today. We're going to talk into dive into some NBA. Adam Silver came out with some very interesting information about possibly players coming out of high school again. We're going to dive into the NFL Combine, the storylines from that is finally over. But we're going to start the show talking about recently franchise tag players, because there are some names in there that at least a couple people thought might not be franchise tagged, and a couple people that we did, but we'll see what's going to happen with them. So, Jerry, I'll let you start, kind of explain. We've obviously explained what franchise tags are, but explain some of the guys that we're going to talk about today that were a little surprising they got franchise tagged.
Yeah, there's a couple. So I'm going to start with the obvious ones. Le'Veon Bell, Pittsburgh Steelers. That's very easy. He is arguably the best running back in the National Football League. The Steelers would have been fools to not franchise tag him. And basically now they will exclusively be able to talk with him and his agent. And at least for this next upcoming season, the 2018 season, he will be a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. DeMarcus Lawrence, the defensive end for the Cowboys, was also franchise tagged. I don't think it's something that the Cowboys necessarily wanted to do. I think they wanted to work out a long-term deal, but they ended up franchise tagging him. I know we mentioned this last week on the podcast, but just quickly, Jarvis Landry, the receiver from the Dolphins, he was also franchise tagged. And there's a lot of speculation going on and different rumors. Like, there's some rumors going out there that the Dolphins are, even though they franchise tagged him, they're willing to listen to trade offers from other teams. There's other reports saying that the Dolphins have given Landry permission to go and talk to the other teams. Mm-hmm. So there's some interesting things going on with the Dolphins. Not really sure if Landry will be a part of that organization in 2018. So those are I would say the three biggest franchise tags that I can think of. Are there some other underlining ones that maybe aren't as
I
big?
think you kind of grabbed the ones that I want to talk about today. At least these are kind of more of the star players getting the nod. I think it was it Kyle Fuller for Chicago that got signed?
He got the transition tag. So there's two different types of tags, but he did get tagged as well. So basically, he got the transition tag, which is
Kendall Fuller or Kyle Fuller.
Kyle Fuller. Kendall
exactly.
Fuller was just traded to
That's
the Chiefs.
See, I knew I mixed up the two. I was like, I didn't think Kendall Fuller.
And they
was
are brothers.
Yeah.
Kyle Fuller, the cornerback for the Chicago Bears, he got the transitional tag, which is a little less than the franchise tag, which means that other teams can still speak with Kyle Fuller, and if they choose to trade for him, they would have to give up a first-round pick.
Yeah.
So the franchise tag means that that player can only speak with the team that he's currently on, and he cannot talk to any other teams. The transitional tag gives the player the opportunity to go speak with other teams, but then that other team would have to give back reimbursement. So a couple different ways. Also, LaMarcus Joyner, the cornerback for the Rams,
there's another one.
was franchise tag. That one was a little interesting. The Rams were obviously they got Marcus Peters, traded for Marcus Peters, the All-Pro cornerback from the Chiefs. They're kind of in a weird situation with Tremaine Johnson, who's been their kind of star corner for the last couple of years. But they franchise tagged Johnson last year. Not really sure if they're doing with him this year. So LaMarcus Joyner, in my opinion, is one of the best slot corners in the game. He can play outside, inside. He's even played a little bit of safety for Wade Phillips in that defense. So another guy that got franchise tagged yesterday.
But so let's start with talking about the big one, Le'Veon Bell. I think we've talked about him a lot just because he's such a star player. Whenever you're talking about the conversation for top 5 running backs, Le'Veon Bell has to be there. He's one of the best top 5 running backs. He's one of the best players in the NFL. And this franchise tag, like you said, it makes sense since the Steelers want to hold him for themselves. They don't want any other teams going after him. The only thing I ask, though, is they need to make a deal quick, I think, with Le'Veon Bell, because he obviously wants a long-term deal. And I think we could have a major holdout situation if he doesn't get that long-term deal. I think if they do put him on a 1-year contract again, especially with the way running backs have kind of lived in the NFL recently, a lot of the guys We talk about the 4 or 5 year rule where a lot of running backs only play 4 or 5 years in the NFL. Le'Veon Bell's on that 4th or 5th year right now. So he's at that point where do the Steelers really want to give him a long-term extension or do they want to play him for 1 year? I think this is a situation, and I think a lot of other people think this too, that if Le'Veon Bell does not get an extension, he's not playing for the Steelers until he gets that extension.
Really? You think he would hold out?
I think he would hold out. Yeah, he doesn't seem like the happiest camper right now in the offseason. Obviously, we've heard him on TMZ talk about, hey, Jets, give me $100 million. I'll go to you guys, right? It seems like Jets want to throw $100 million at a lot of players this offseason. But I think Le'Veon Bell is a little tired of the shenanigans with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think this could be a difficult situation for him and Pittsburgh if this deal doesn't get done. And I personally think a deal will get done. Although it might not be the smartest move for the Steelers to get the deal done, I think it will get done because you obviously don't want to be going into the year with Fitzgerald Toussaint as your running back.
No, not at all. Not at all. Listen, this one is very tricky because for Le'Veon Bell, you've got all the leverage. It's not all the leverage, but it's like, listen, I'm the best running back in the league. And you know what? He's not even, some of these guys now, like Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, they're not just running backs. They're all purpose guys. Like, they catch the ball out of the backfield, They block, also run in between that. Like, they do so much. So he's not just a running back to me. He is, him and Antonio Brown are the entire offense. So that Le'Veon Bell, for him, I would go to the table, and say, listen, this is what I offer. This is what I bring to the table. Go try to win games and win a Super Bowl without me. It's not going to happen.
They can't even get to the conference finals without me.
Right. So Bell right now has his deadline or his money line at $14.5 million per year. He will not play for anything less than that.
And what is the franchise tag?
The franchise tag is at $14.5.
Okay.
But he wants instead of playing for 1 year, he wants the 4 or 5 year $14.5 million.
And I don't see that as that big of a margin of money for the Steelers to pay either. I don't think that's obviously people would talk about Kirk Cousins possibly getting $30+ million. And I get that's quarterback, but a running back that essentially plays receiver too, only paying him $14 million doesn't seem that big of a deal. Which is why another reason I think that the Steelers will do the deal, even though the life of a running back might not be the longest thing and you might not want to pay a guy that long, I think the deal will get done.
Well, like you mentioned, Le'Veon Bell is not bluffing about sitting out and or possibly retiring if he doesn't get the deal.
Yeah, he's even saying he's retire.
Yeah, if he doesn't get the deal that he feels he should get from the Steelers. I think at this point it comes down to a respect factor. He's saying, listen, it's not that I don't want to play for you guys, but I've proven myself, and I'm not going to sit here and play on a 1 year deal and then potentially go out and seriously injure myself, tear my ACL or something, and then have no type of safety net to fall back on, right? Obviously, $14.5 million is a lot of money, and there's not a lot of human beings that would turn that down. But in his situation, when he has a chance to lock himself up for 4 or 5 years and will really set himself up financially for his future and for his family, I think he has to wait it out. Him and his agent need to continue to have discussions with the Steelers and go back and forth. I think the Steelers need to come up. I think they've lowballed him way too much, and it's been a lot of disrespect. And if I'm Bell, I'm going to say, listen, I'm at 14.5. Meet me there. Now, if it's a 4 or 5 year contract, more than likely he won't play out that entire contract,
I doubt it.
right?
Yeah,
right,
true.
because that's the NFL lifespan is just not that long, especially for a running back when you're taking all those hits and all that stuff. But say he plays 3 years at $14.5 million, okay, and then the other 2 years they work out a settlement where he either makes half of that or something like that. So in the end, Steelers need to come up big.
Yeah.
And if they want any chance of contending for the Super Bowl or at least the AFC Championship, they need Le'Veon Bell in that backfield protecting Roethlisberger.
Well, you talked about respect, and I think he saw Antonio Brown get a giant contract and said, well, why can't I get that? And obviously they play two different positions, but without Le'Veon Bell, I don't know if Antonio Brown does the exact same stuff he does every week. They've both been kind of around with the Steelers for around the same amount of years, correct? It's been kind of a tag team almost with those two. So I think he's like, if you're going to give Antonio Brown that money, why don't you give it to me? It's obviously not going to go to Big Ben. Big Ben's going to retire soon. It's not, the quarterback position's not going to get where that money's going to come from. So might as well give it to me. I also think with long-term contract, maybe he saw what happened with Ryan Shazier and said, "Oh my gosh, I got to get this money."
Yeah,
because if something would happen to me, obviously I don't want to not have. I just don't all of a sudden don't want to have a salary. And obviously there's injury settlements, all that. But the bad thing about Ryan Shazier, what's terrible about it, is that obviously he got hurt and he's not going to play this year. They've already announced he's not going to play this year. But this was going to be one of the years where he was going to get a long-term contract. He was going to get an extension. He was going to get paid. He was finally off his rookie contract. So I think that might be in Le'Veon Bell's head too, where it's hey, I don't want to become Ryan Shazier. I don't want to, go down to run somebody over once, lower my head, and then break my neck on a play. And then all of a sudden I don't have any money. I have money for 1 year and that's it. I'm done. I have no money for the rest of my life. I have to go find a different job. Right? So I think that might be in his head a little bit too, which is why I think this deal will eventually get done. I think there's too many factors, and I don't think the Steelers want the distraction of Le'Veon Bell holding out.
In my opinion, that is the main argument for every player that is playing on a 1-year contract and or the franchise tag. It's the security. It's the long-term benefits. Listen, of course, if you get franchise tagged and a team is offering you, $14 or $20 million for the year, yes, you're going to want that. It's not that you want to turn that down. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, these athletes are greedy and, all they care about is money and, how much is too much and all that stuff. But when you really sit back and think about it, think of it, as yourself with your own career at whatever job you have. Say you work at a bank, right? Yeah. You want to be on a year-to-year basis, a year-to-year salary where, if you don't perform well, you can basically just get fired or let go. You want that long-term security of knowing, all right, I'm going to have benefits. I may not have the highest salary, but I'm going to have a steady salary that I know is going to be coming in. So I think for a lot of these players, including Le'Veon Bell, I think because he's felt so disrespected by the Steelers' previous offers, I think that's why he's continued to raise his price. But realistically, if the Steelers came to him at say $13 million or $13.5 and said, "Hey, we want to give that to you for 4 years," then I think I think they're gonna come together and end up working out a deal. But if the Steelers come out and say, "Here's $9 million or $10 million,"
oh hell no,
that's ridiculous. That's dumb. And so far, that's reportedly what we've heard from the Steelers organization.
Yeah, that's not good, and that needs to change. But it should be an interesting thing to watch the rest of the year.
One more thing: if Le'Veon Bell for some reason does not play, they do have James Conner right behind him.
My bad.
Right. Who played at Pittsburgh and obviously. Survived and beat cancer and was able to get drafted by the Steelers and stay in his hometown where he played college ball. So he's a damn good running back as well. Obviously, he doesn't get the recognition that you would think he would get because he's behind Le'Veon Bell. But he's a really, really good back, and he will be able to do some things behind that.
Absolutely. I made the Fitzgerald Toussaint reference just because I didn't know who the backup was.
That's why I had to go look at their roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we obviously named a couple others. Jared, in your opinion, what's the next bet? We're talking about franchise tag. DeMarcus Lawrence, obviously, I know you're kind of inside with that one. Being a Cowboys fan, we talked about LaMarcus Joyner. What were some of the other ones you named again, just real quick?
Yeah, so it was LaMarcus Joyner, DeMarcus Lawrence, Jarvis Landry.
We talked about that last week, though.
Right, and then Kyle Fuller.
Yeah. Okay, well, so then.
So the thing is, every team, all 32 teams, have the opportunity to franchise tag one player per year. And you don't have to use that tag. Say you don't have, an organization doesn't have a player that they feel is worthy of the franchise tag, or they don't have the money, or whatever the reason. So, it's not every year that every team is going to franchise tag a player. Some years it might only be 5, some years it might be 10. Who knows? So there's certain situations where teams need to do that in order to lengthen their contract negotiations with the player. But the hope is that the team and the player can sit down and work out a long-term agreement without even have to place the franchise tag on a player, because then that's just one more step. Because then if you don't come to a long-term agreement, then you're gonna have to fork out big money for 1 year.
Well, so between the last two we talked about, or the DeMarcus Lawrence and LaMarcus Joyner, which one do you think is going to make a bigger impact for their team? Which franchise tag do you think is a bigger deal between those two?
And this isn't me being a homer, even though I am a Cowboys fan. I really think it's DeMarcus Lawrence for the Cowboys because of the position that he plays and because the Cowboys honestly have a mediocre defense. He led the NFL in sacks last year. He was a second-round pick by the Cowboys who his first 3 years in the league had shown flashes of being a top-tier talent, but never really brought it together, whether it was injuries or whatever the case may be, up until last year. And of course, I hate to say this, but it's funny that he somehow has his best year in the final year of his contract, right? When he's trying to get a new deal, somehow he stays healthy the whole year. Somehow he leads the league in sacks. Like, I'm not saying he wasn't.
The Cowboys in a difficult
position. I'm not saying he wasn't trying his first 3 years. It's just, it's funny how when guys are coming up on their contracts and they're looking for new deals, somehow they get that little extra motivation, and they somehow start to play better.
He also had his best game against the Arizona Cardinals.
He did.
He absolutely ravaged Jared Bell.
It was funny. He went out on Twitter and he said he's looking to break the bank in 2019 when they renegotiate. So, take that for what you will, but break the bank. That I don't know what is he thinking? Like 18 million? He's talking about quarterback money because he's not going to get that. I'm sorry, you're not J.J. Watt. You're not Khalil Mack. You're not Von Miller. You're not going to get that kind of money. So I think he needs to stick with his $17 million and be very happy with that, at least for this year. But going back to actually on the field and why I think he would be more important, I think it's because the depth that the Cowboys, or the lack thereof, the depth that the Cowboys have on that defensive line. And they do have some young guys. They have David Irving, Tyrone Crawford. They drafted Taco Charlton out of Michigan last year. So they do have some pieces, but I don't think they could, say, you know what, we're not going to place the tag on DeMarcus Lawrence and we're going to gamble with letting him go away to another team, because then the Cowboys would really be in a pickle. And then I think they would really be forcing themselves to have to draft a defensive end early in the draft. And that's not really what you want to do. You kind of want to go into the draft with an open mind and be able to pick the best player available. So I think he really helps solidify that defensive line. Hopefully that team can go from mediocre to at least good, because right now they're middle of the pack at best. And you take DeMarcus Lawrence away, and they become one of the worst defenses in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think DeMarcus Lawrence is more important to the Cowboys than LaMarcus Joyner is to the Rams. But I actually think the bigger tag in this situation is LaMarcus Joyner, because I think this finally solidifies that the Rams have moved on from Tremaine Johnson. I think by trading for Marcus Peters, taking a flyer on him, a guy that's kind of been a difficult guy in the locker room, and then franchise tag LaMarcus Joyner, I think this finally is telling Tremaine Johnson, hey, we don't really need you anymore. We can deal with LaMarcus Joyner at corner. We can have Marcus Peters as their other corner, and that's that. And I think that's okay for the Rams. I think LaMarcus Joyner, like we mentioned, he's a great corner. He's a very versatile guy. He can play a lot of different positions. Then you have Marcus Peters, one of the best corners in the game, although difficult on and off the field. He's one of the best corners in the game. You can't go against that. So I do believe that is the bigger tag in this situation. I think the Cowboys one makes a lot more sense just because of, like you mentioned, they kind of need DeMarcus Lawrence at that position. But I think LaMarcus Joyner, the tag in this situation is a bigger deal because it's freeing up Tremaine Johnson. It's saying, hey, we're not going to have you in the near future with our team. We don't see you in the future of our team, even though he's been kind of their guy, one of their guys on defense. I think this starts the conversation about the possible extension also for Aaron Donald, who is, you could say, the best defensive player in the league.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
Yeah, so I think franchise tagging LaMarcus Joyner, that also will free up money because you're not paying Tremaine Johnson for Aaron Donald. And I think it just sets in motion a lot more than the Cowboys situation. But you make a good point about the Cowboys. They do need to sign DeMarcus Lawrence in that situation. So let's move on to the last part of this segment. And since, like we said, we're really not going to be able to talk much football for the next 3 weeks, so we wanted to give our prediction on the biggest free agent signing of the offseason. And like you mentioned, free agency starts March 14th. And the biggest name has been Kirk Cousins. Quarterback, we've been talking about it a lot because Kirk Cousins is the top quarterback on the market right now. We've compared him to Aaron Rodgers. We've compared him to everybody. But let's finally make our final prediction. Since we won't be able to talk about, Jared, I'll let you start. Where do you think Kirk Cousins ends up in 2018?
Yeah, so first off, right now the rumors are that there are basically 4 teams left in the running. Yeah. The Denver Broncos, New York Jets, Arizona Cardinals, and Minnesota Vikings. At the said this before on a couple podcasts before, that there's basically two ways Kirk Cousins can go. He can choose to go all out for the money.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, then I think he goes to the New York Jets because I think they can offer him the most money. Plain and simple. If you want to be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history and, get $100 million guaranteed and make $40 million in your first year, go ahead. But you're going to go to a crappy team that's not going to win, and they're probably 3 or 4 ways from even contending for the playoffs. If he's willing to take a little bit less money and he wants to win right now, I think he has 2 options. That's either Denver or Minnesota. I'm going to choose Minnesota over Denver because I think Minnesota has a little more offensive firepower and just a little more well-rounded team. Even though Denver has a great defense still, I would choose Minnesota. So for my 2 picks, it's kind of tough to say one or the other. In the end, I think he's going to Minnesota. I think he's willing to take a little bit less money to understand that, hey, listen, I'm in the prime of my career and I want to win games. Minnesota gives me the best opportunity to win, and I can also still make a boatload of money. If he does go sign with the Jets, I think that tells you that he's basically all about the money. He doesn't care about winning. Done deal.
Yeah. No, so I'll do it by process of elimination with mine. I actually don't think he's going to go for the money. I think the Jets are kind of eliminated in this situation. I think he needs a good defense to kind of succeed in the NFL. He's not a quarterback that's going to be going one-on-one with Tom Brady, in a way. Let's say that. In a game. And so I think he needs a defense. So I think the Jets are eliminated in this situation. So I think it comes down to the Cardinals, Vikings, and Broncos. If I had to choose, though, and you kind of stole a lot of my ammo here, but I think it's Minnesota because when you look at the 3 defenses in that case, Denver's got a good defense, but it's been kind of depleted since they've won the Super Bowl.
And they're losing Aqib Talib,
exactly.
Derek Wolfe. They're losing some of those pieces.
And so they're even losing more pieces. Arizona has a good defense, but there's been rumors that they're going to release Tyrann Mathieu and that they're going to do a lot of other things. So that defense is getting a little depleted too. Minnesota's, no, it's still kind of star-studded. There's not a lot of guys leaving. You have Xavier Rhodes, Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr. Anybody else you want to mention? Harrison Smith at safety. You have all of those guys. So I do think it's Minnesota. I do think he takes a pay cut. And I do think that will be interesting because that will open up the quarterbacks from the Vikings to really go wherever the hell they want to.
Oh my gosh.
I think a lot of them. Yeah. It's going to be a free
domino effect.
Like opening up like a cow pen and letting them all out. It's going to be a cool thing. So I think Kirk Cousins will end up with the Vikings. I have to agree with you. You stole all my ammo. So pretty much what Jared said, I'm saying the exact same thing. I think he ends up with the Vikings. Unfortunately, obviously, I want him to join the Cardinals. But just looking at it, we don't have a lot of money to sign him. And I think the Vikings would be a better situation for him since they were so close to the Super Bowl this year. And I just think that'd be the smartest move for him.
And listen, when we say that Kirk Cousins would potentially take a pay cut, it's not like he's going to go and make like $10 million. The kid's still going to get paid, okay? He's still going to be in like the 20 to $25 million range. He's just not going to be the highest paid
quarterback like ever.
Right, but listen, at the end of the day, and I've said this before, what do you want to be remembered by? Because, future generations, they're not going to remember how much money you made. Like,
of course.
Yeah, I'm sure, they can look it up on the internet, but like, do you want to be remembered for being the highest paid player ever? Or do you want to be remembered for winning Super Bowls and having a legacy that you will be, not in the Hall of Fame, but like they can never take that Super Bowl away from you.
Yeah.
Money is money and that is fantastic, but you can still take care of your family with $20 million a year, right?
Absolutely.
You can't ever, fake say that you won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So for me, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? I would take the $20 million a year as opposed to the $25 or $30 million a year. And have a better chance at winning Super Bowls. But you know what? That's just me. I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins isn't thinking this way. I'm sure he is, and I'm sure in the end, I think we both agree that he does go to Minnesota.
Yeah.
And then from that Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Bradford, all 3 of them will be looking for new homes. Don't be surprised if the Vikings do potentially bring one of those guys back. I don't think it's going to be Case Keenum. Or Teddy Bridgewater.
Sam Bradford, yeah, I was thinking Sam.
I could potentially see them bringing back Sam Bradford as an insurance policy just in case Kirk Cousins does go down. But more than likely, at least 2 of those 3 quarterbacks will be gone.
No, absolutely. So that's the end of the NFL segment. We are going to move on to NBA talk. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Adam Silver potentially bringing back high school players to the NFL or to the NBA. We'll talk about that next on the Cover 2 podcast.
Thunder trying to remain in that top 8 and get as high as possible and play basketball at their best.
16th straight win for Houston, 9th consecutive on the road. Our final score here tonight, Houston 122, OKC 112.
Yeah, so the NBA has been watching as scandal has been unfolding throughout youth basketball and college basketball, and they have been quietly behind the scenes having discussions with all the stakeholders, the union, USA Basketball, their teams, and they are getting ready to act. And in the next couple of months, they are going to present a plan that is going to change one and done. Now, this is not just simply opening up a door for 18-year-olds to come to the NBA. This is a comprehensive change to the way the NBA is going to deal with teenagers. Remember, 13 years ago, David Stern wanted NBA personnel out of high school gyms. With the way things are going, Adam Silver doesn't just want to get back in with high school gyms. He wants to get back in the game of developing players all the way through high school and graduating them either to the G League or to the NBA, essentially giving players another path than AAU, college, NBA. Now they can maybe be involved with the NBA all the way through their teenage years.
Cover 2 podcast back live on OC Rock Radio. Once again, I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And we're coming at you with an NBA segment. Like Nick had mentioned right before we went to break, we're going to be talking about Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and how he is looking to change the ways of the NBA as far as when players are eligible to be drafted into the NBA. Right now, players have to go to college for at least 1 year, and or they can choose to go overseas and play and then return in order to be draft eligible. Obviously, a lot of controversy going on with the NCAA, with recruiting scandals and all that type of stuff. So, there's a lot of different opinions out there as opposed to whether the NBA should let players come into the league straight out of high school, whether players should stay in college longer. Obviously, a lot of different avenues here. So I want to get Nick's opinion first, just on kind of this overall view, what you think Adam Silver is looking for, and then what you think will actually happen in the end.
Yeah, well, obviously with this huge NCAA problem with the recruiting scandal and agents getting involved and all this, we now have to change something in the NBA, and I think the step that the NFL the NBA wants to make is possibly going back to high school and getting players straight from high school. Now, this is not definitive at all, but this is just a rumor and a thing that Adam Silver's kind of toyed with a little bit the last week or so. Now, back in 2005, when David Stern made the rule that said you had to be 19 years old or 1 year out of high school to be eligible for the NBA. So that pretty much warded off anybody coming straight from high school to the NBA, a la Dwight Howard, a la Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Kevin Garnett. That wasn't going to happen anymore, and it hasn't happened since 2005. The closest we've seen it is Brandon Jennings, who went overseas. We saw Emmanuel Mudiay go overseas for 1 year, but they went over for 1 year and then came to the NBA. It wasn't a long-term stint over where they went. So the problem with it now is the reason David Stern did that was to keep to keep agents and to keep NBA scouts out of high school gyms. And the problem is now we need to keep scouts and agents out of college gyms.
Damn scouts and agents.
It's the exact same thing. I remember I was watching the Oscars last Sunday, and Jimmy Kimmel made a joke about agents that I thought was so fitting for really the whole world right now, because agents are kind of messing everything up. And especially in the college basketball ranks, it's messing it up. And I think, obviously, there's a huge problem. It needs to be changed. And I just think there needs to be almost like a combo, like a hybrid rule where, and I've said this for a long time, you look at the NFL, And the NFL is you have to go play at least 3 years. Now, that's due to the physical nature of football. That's due to the fact that really high school players are not ready for the NFL. Most of them, you look at, my brother's a sophomore in high school right now. He's going to be going into his junior year of football. I can't imagine him playing in the NFL in 2 years. Okay, it's ridiculous. He's still growing as a human being. So that seems ridiculous. That makes sense. Baseball's an interesting one, though. Baseball does it so that you either get drafted straight out of high school, which many, many people do. Top picks are often guys straight from high school. Or you have to go to college and you have to go for 3 years, like the NFL. So it's more of, okay, well, if we think you're good enough straight out of high school, you get drafted. But if we don't, you probably should go to college and then get the experience at college, go 3 years, and then you'll be a polished player. It's worked for many. There was a player named Griffin Canning that came out of Orange County that now was just drafted by the Angels that could have probably been drafted out of high school. I think he was drafted in about the 4th or 5th round. Said no, going to UCLA, and improved his draft stock, and then I believe got drafted in the early 2nd round by the Angels last year. So he improved his draft stock. Took him 3 years, but it was whatever. I think the NBA might have to do something like that. You say, okay, if you're good enough out of high school, you go and you can play. Because obviously we've seen LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett. These are Hall of Famers. These are some of the best players to ever play. Came straight out of high school. But do you say if you go to college, you make it 2 or 3 years, you say, okay, well, if you go to college, let's keep the college game up a little bit. Let's keep it so that it's competitive and not everybody is coming out, that scouts aren't always going to be all over the place screwing with players because you're there for a long time. Because like I think I mentioned either this last week or 2 weeks ago, it's going to be very hard to collude with a player for 2 or 3 years compared to 1 year. So I think maybe that's what the NBA has to do. But Jared, I think I talked a little bit too long. I'll let you kind of give your take.
No, not at all. Like I said, there's so many different avenues that go along with this topic. And I basically want to start with saying this. This is about players and these student athletes as people and their growth. Yeah. Because listen, we all know that these guys can play. It's not about the actual playing basketball to me. This is about them being able to grow and mature as men. And listen, playing in high school is one thing. It's great. You're the star in your team or in your town, and everyone knows your name, and you're popular, and that's really cool. And obviously, in today's world with social media, it's a lot easier, to be recognized on a national scale as opposed to before social media was really out. But still, even then, going straight from high school to the National Basketball Association and immediately becoming a millionaire as an 18-year-old. Like, why do you think there are so many guys that haven't made it or blew money in their first 2 years and are now broke and out of the league and looking for jobs because they didn't make it? Like, what, you think you're just going to hand an 18-year-old kid millions of dollars and you expect them to be completely responsible and go out and save all their money and put their money away and not buy anything and be extravagant? Like what do you expect? So that is the first issue that I have, is that like Adam Silver is mentioning in his potential proposal, is that he wants to work with these high school kids, put them in classes and educate them more on what it is like to become a professional athlete, money management, and all those small things that I don't think people really think about when you see these guys jump straight from high school to the NBA, like LeBron James and Kobe and Kevin Garnett. Now, I'm not saying that high school athletes aren't mature and they can't take care of themselves and spend their money wisely and have a great career. I'm not saying that can't happen, but the overall majority of these kids would more than likely kind of waste their talent in a sense. Another issue that you kind of touched on was the actual one and done rule of, kids going to college just for 1 year and then bouncing right to the NBA. I think that's bad all around. It's obviously really bad for the NCAA because that's just, it doesn't help with the recruiting. There's more chances that coaches will take with, wanting to give a guy money or some type of other beneficial factor to get them to come to their school, because It's every single year you're trying to get the top recruits, right? It's not like, hey, listen, we're going to have you for 3, potentially 4 years, so we're going to have you for a little more longevity. It's like, we're trying to win right now. And then the next year, we're trying to win right now. And then the year again, right? It's that same thing over and over. If you're a student athlete and you only go to college for 1 year and then you go pro, whether it's in the NBA or international or whatever, what is the incentive to want to come back to college for 3 more years? It's like, oh my gosh, like I still have 3 more years, but I'm a millionaire and I'm in the NBA playing professionally. Like, you know what I mean? Like that would be, for me at least, I know it would be a lot tougher to want to pick up and go back to my studies and go back to school knowing I had 3 years left. If the NBA were to change their rules and make it so that student athletes had to stay in college for at least 3 years like college football does, then when that athlete comes out as a junior, academically at least, and they go pro or whatever, if they want to go back to college, they only have 1 year left. I don't know about you, 1 year of college sounds a lot better than 3 more years of college, right? So even if you have all that money and all that stuff, going back for 1 year, whether you just take classes in the summer or you take classes online or whatever, it's a lot easier for those kids to go back and get their degree, only having 1 year. So I think that one's kind of self-explanatory, but there's obviously, like I mentioned, a lot of different avenues with that. I think in the end, what Adam Silver and the NBA needs to do is connect with these high school players that are currently in high school. Like I said, get them into money management programs. Sit them down with former NBA players and current NBA players, guys who are currently going through, what it's like to be a professional athlete, and let these high school players see what it's like from both ends. See what it's like for a successful person like a Kobe Bryant or a Kevin Garnett who came straight out of high school and did well. And then, bring in some guys who unfortunately were busts and didn't make it, and have them, sit down face to face and say, hey, listen, if you guys aren't smart, you could be in my shoes. You know what I mean? I think it's one thing to sit here and talk about it and all that stuff, and it's going to go in one ear and out the other ear, because a lot of these athletes are like, listen, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and no one can tell me anything. But when they actually physically see someone else and see the shoes that they're in, like, hey, listen, this isn't a joke, this is the real world, and we're going to be coming out of the woodworks asking you for money and all this stuff, and you can go from rich to broke just like that. So in the end, I think it's about the NBA, joining and working with these high school players, and giving them alternatives and giving them different options and different avenues, so that it's not just about the one and done. Because right now, it's you either go to college for 1 year or you go overseas, right? That's basically it. And I think these kids need more options to select from.
Now, let's debate this, because I've heard this argument too. The argument of, hey, just letting players leave whenever they want. You go high school, you want to leave after high school? Go ahead. 1 year college? Go ahead. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, all that. What do you think the difficulties would be with that? Or do we think that's kind of the best way to go? Because I personally think even that way would kind of expunge the whole agent, because I think that's where we had the problem here. Where we're discussing this was we don't want the agents, we don't want the cheating, we don't want the recruiting scandals. So obviously if a player can just do whatever he wants, then you're not going to have agents going in there kind of telling them what to do, because they can do whatever they want. They can just say, well, I want to go to college for 3 years. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I'm that good. So I'm going to, So where's this debate? Where does this land? Do we think this is a possibility, or do we think there's too many restrictions behind it?
That's very interesting. I think for the athlete, I think that would be great, because like I just mentioned, that's multiple options, right? Yeah. And I think that's what these players want is, options to say, hey, listen, I'm not necessarily a school guy. I know I'm very talented. I know I can go into the NBA. I need to support my family. My family doesn't have a lot of money. I need to go in the NBA right now. That's one option. Another option is, hey, you know what? I've wanted to go to USC my whole life. And you go to USC, and then you have a breakout year, and your draft stock is really high, and you want to leave after a year. Great. You go to USC, and maybe you get injured. You tear your ACL, and you have a full year of rehab. So you come back as a sophomore, and you need a year to kind of rebuild your draft stock, right? That in a sense is giving players options, and I do like that idea. From the NBA standpoint, I don't know if they would go for that because they would not really, the NBA and the NCAA would not have as much control.
Exactly.
And as we know, those, the NBA and these organizations, they want to be in control. And this is a situation where they would just have to sit back and wait for these players to make decisions, and they would have to deal with it, whatever the decision is. So I like it from the athlete standpoint. From the NBA and the NCAA standpoint, I'm not sure that they would be sold on it because of the control factor or lack thereof.
Yeah, and I think this whole thing kind of does have to do with the NBA trying to control what's going on. Obviously, they don't want there to be these guys coming in, like, we heard with this whole scandal, Markelle Fultz's name is in this. There was countless others names.
Jackson.
Dennis Smith Jr., all these guys. It was like, so the NBA now has all these players. They're in here that essentially cheated to get their way into the NBA. And that's a bad look on the NBA. Obviously, it's a worse and terrible look on the NCAA. And high school just looks fine. High school looks fine. But, so I do think it'll be interesting to see what Silver does. But him even bringing up the fact that they possibly bring in the high school rule, where guys can just come out of high school, and this is why people say Adam Silver is like the most progressive, probably the best commissioner out of the four sports. This guy just gets it, right? He sees a problem, and the next year he's already talking about it. We saw it with the Donald Sterling thing. Immediately, you're banned from the league, gone. Let's have new ownership with the Clippers. Now the Clippers have Steve Ballmer as owner. Okay, guy loves the game, all that stuff. So I think this also strengthens just how good of a commissioner Adam Silver's been, and how the NBA just kind of gets it. But I actually liked your idea too about the getting players, high school players, kind of acclimated with the NBA life before they go into the NBA. If there was that rule, they come out of high school. But I think, like, you go to, when you're in high school, you see all these college fairs and you see job fairs and all that stuff come to your high school and say, hey, do this. You want to do this after high school? Go to college for this, all this stuff. Why can't the NBA do that same exact thing? Plus, obviously, a basketball player's dream is always to become an NBA player. Normally,
you would think
you're not gonna want to become a banker or some people want to become a lawyer, but mainly you want to become an NBA player. It's a lot of money. Become a star, get all the girls, all that stuff. So it's I do think that we came up with some good reasons for the NBA to do certain things, and I think that's good. But ultimately, we'll see what they do. It's all going to have to do with money, anyways, in the long run.
As always.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. So let's transition. We still have a little bit more time in the segment. Houston and it was the Thunder that played last night, right?
They did.
So the Houston kind of beat the crap out of them, and Houston just solidifying that they're one of the best teams in the NBA. Like we've been mentioning the whole podcast, we don't have a lot of material for the next couple weeks. So, Jared, we'll kind of jump on this and we'll guess this early. How well or how good of a chance did the Houston Rockets have of beating Golden State in the series the way they're playing right now? I'll start, because I had you start the Kirk Cousins thing. I think Houston is right there. I think if they were in a series with the Warriors and Rockets, I think they would have a chance. I'm hearing a lot of people on ESPN, a lot of people on Fox saying, no way Houston has a chance. You know what, though? They're too good. They make so many threes. They're way better on defense than a normal Mike D'Antoni team is.
Can't believe we're saying that.
Yeah, no, I know. And they have the two stars in Chris Paul and James Harden that have worked out better than I think any star tandem ever has before. So, excuse me. I do think that Houston has a chance to beat Golden State. I'm not saying I would pick them, but I'm not saying I would. So I do think Houston right now is a legitimate contender to be in the NBA Finals.
Houston has a lot of momentum going with them. They just went into Oklahoma City, and I want to, I guess, preference my statements. It's not that they came in and like completely annihilated the Thunder. The Rockets won by 10. But it's the way that they're winning and the way that they're able to kind of work together. When Chris Paul first went to the Houston Rockets, obviously Chris Paul is a superstar, in my opinion, one of the best point guards in the league. But James Harden was just coming off in a career-high year being the point guard for the Rockets.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, who's going to be the real point guard? Is it going to be Chris Paul and James Harden's going to go back to his normal position? Or because James Harden had such a great year, are they going to ask Chris Paul to do different things? And I think the great thing about these two is they put their egos aside and they said, hey, listen, we know that we're both great players and we're both all-stars. At the end of the day, neither of us have won championships, and that's what all they're about right now. So I think they both made sacrifices in their game to, they're still putting up 20-plus points, especially James Harden. I think he's closer to 30. But they're making sacrifices in both of their games to get their other teammates involved, and it's obviously showing as they hold the best record in the NBA right now. And they are a half game ahead of Golden State. So kind of echoing what you were saying, I think right now, if this was a 7-game series with the Rockets and the Warriors, I would pick the Warriors, but I think it would go 7. Like, no doubt. It would go 7.
Which means anything can happen.
It would be back and forth. The Rockets, and I can't believe I am saying this, their defense is actually...
Yeah, it's good.
I don't want to say the word. I don't want to say the word
it's good
because I feel like I'm giving Mike D'Antoni too much credit. So I'm not going to say good. But they have a better defense.
That's some Lakers Suns hate.
It is. They have they have a better defense than previously coached Mike D'Antoni teams. I'll leave it at that. The thing is, they put up 120 points like it's nothing, and it's not that they don't have to play defense, but if you're the opponent, you basically have to score on every other possession. You have to keep up with the Rockets scoring, and I think that's what it is. A lot of teams just can't keep up with that scoring. The Golden State Warriors obviously can with their sharpshooters of Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. So I think these games will be like 120, 130.
It's the All-Star game.
Yeah. Oh, it literally would be an All-Star game with all the All-Stars that are on these teams. So I would give it to the Warriors in a 7-game series, but I'm telling you right now, I hope, and the NBA better hope as well, because the ratings will go through the roof, that we get a Houston Rockets Golden State Warriors matchup. Hopefully, like in the Western Conference Finals. That would be fantastic if we could see that. And then the winner of that goes on to the finals to more than likely play the Cavaliers, because I think we can both agree that the Cavaliers are probably going to get there in the East. But no, in the West, a lot more competitive. And the Rockets are right there. Listen, best of 7, you never know.
No, and I think this goes back to the fact that the reason they're playing so well is because James Harden recruited Chris Paul. Like you mentioned, he had an MVP year, right? He was the point guard of the team. And then he was going out there with the Rockets brass saying, hey, Chris, I want you to come play for us. I don't care if you play my position. I want you because I think you're a better player than most players that could come onto this team to join. So I want you to play for us. And I think that shows it. And I think that shows why they've been playing so well. These guys wanted to play with each other. I think you look at the Thunder, it was kind of, they just put guys together. Carmelo Anthony, who's always been selfish. Paul George, Russell Westbrook, who's always kind of been selfish. And then Paul George is kind of in the middle. But I think that's why that team hasn't succeeded as well. Because they're in the exact same situation as Houston. They added a star player, in their case, 1.5. Throw Carmelo under the bus. And so they're in the same situation, and one team is working, and one team is losing every single time to that team. And one team is in the middle of the playoff race, whereas the other team is in first place in the NBA. So I think it just has to do a little bit with that, the fact that they've kind of they've worked well together so far, and I think that's why it might work in the playoffs. Hopefully, Chris Paul doesn't get hurt like he always does. As a Clipper fan, I deal with that every single year.
You're just throwing shade
Chris
right
Paul,
now.
It doesn't matter. 3 weeks off. We're not talking about the NBA. I got to get all my stuff in. But so I think that's not the way it works. And you're right, though. I would be very, very excited to see Houston Golden State conference final.
I want to see Houston play the Clippers first in like the first or the second round.
I kind of see that too.
Just to see Chris Paul beat the hell out of the Clippers and
I shouldn't have said that because I knew you were going to tear apart the Clippers.
Oh, all day long. You know I was going to go there. So I want to see the Rockets play the Clippers first, annihilate them, and then go play Golden State.
Hey, interesting thing about that, though, is the Clippers, I believe for the season series, might have beaten Houston or at least tied them.
Oh, that's fine. That's just going to make it more interesting.
Okay, well,
the Clippers right now are sitting 1 game out of 8th place. So right now they're technically out of the playoffs. So,
they lost a big game to New Orleans.
They did. So I'm actually going to be rooting for the Clippers here the rest of the way.
Who cares about the Nuggets here?
Hoping that the Rockets stay in first place because I don't see the Clippers edging out the Thunder for that 7th spot. So I think the only way the Clippers get in is if they can jump ahead of the Nuggets, who are currently in the 8th spot right now. So Rockets, stay in first place, keep winning. Golden State, rest some of your players, get ready for the playoffs. Keep that number 2 seed, and let's go Clippers.
Well, yeah, because in the 1-2 seed, it's what's the jump? Is it like 10 games between the Warriors and the third?
Right.
Yeah, so those 2 teams are getting it. So go to rest your players.
Rest your guys, man. Rest your players, nothing to worry about.
Houston does not want Denver in a first-round matchup either because of the altitude and stuff.
Nope.
Either. You don't want that. So, let's go. Jared, what'd you just say a second ago? You said...
I'm only going to say it once. I'm sorry.
Did you say it once? Did you say it once?
No, I already said it once. I'm not going to say it
again.
again.
Dang it.
Sorry. Nice try, though.
Well, we caught it. It's on the podcast. So it's on the podcast. So it'll be on there later. All right, we'll take a break, and we're going to have some more fun in the next segment. We're going to go to Do You Care? We're going to go Do You Care? On the other side of this quick break, this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
And the Oscar goes to... Don't say La La Land, don't say La La Land. Dear Basketball, Glenn Keane and Kobe!
This is the first Oscar and nomination for Glenn Keane and Kobe Bryant.
Tanner, not that you need a 3. Here we go for the 2018 Big South Championship. Gotta go. Jones for the win. He nailed it!
Okay, how close are you to get back?
Soon. I don't have a set date right now, but I've just got to keep doing what I'm doing. The progression that I'm making, it's been great, so just got to keep doing what I'm doing.
Where are you on the protocol? Are you playing 3-on-3 yet?
Yeah, I've been definitely playing some physical contact with guys, not my players, but some of the guys that we have around, and things been going well.
Back here on the Cover 2 podcast, and Jared, you know what time it is?
What time is it, Nick?
It's time for the Do You Care segment here on the podcast.
I was waiting for you to kind of
That was not
yell.
dead air. That was just me being an idiot, looking the other way, not saying anything. That's good dead air. That's good. That's what I've learned. That's good dead air when everyone's waiting and anticipating.
I was waiting and anticipating.
Absolutely. So that's good. That's good. But it's time for Do You Care? Let me get my sheet because I, for some reason, put it on top of this whole thing, and now the pencil almost stabbed me. So it's a good start to the segment so far, Jared, isn't it?
We're rolling.
Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, so Jared's going to get the first question. Do you care? And it's, Jared, do you care that the NBA is talking to the Bulls about tanking?
I don't care. This isn't like this is something new or, something that has not been talked about before. Listen, it's what teams do when they realize that they have no shot at making the playoffs. Why sit there and continue to win games and be middle of the pack and have like the 15th pick when you can quote unquote tank, sit some of your starters, put your backups in and your rookies, and try to get the best possible draft pick you can. Listen, in the NBA, there's only 2 rounds of the draft. And to be very honest, only about the top 10 picks are, really difference makers for teams. So once you get into that middle tier in the second round, you're really looking for depth guys. And, unless you find a steal like Kyle Kuzma for the Lakers, it's very rare that you find, or a Draymond Green for the Warriors, it's rare that you find a player later on in the draft that is going to be able to come in and contribute right away. So to sit there at the 15th pick and, continue to win meaningless games, it just doesn't make sense for teams. So obviously that's where the teams are. For the NBA, of course, from a money standpoint, a rating standpoint, all that stuff, and just the quality of the game, they don't want teams tanking. They want to see good basketball on the court. So I completely get it from the Bulls' standpoint. They suck this year. They're not going anywhere. Obviously, they lost Dwayne Wade last year. That never worked out. So instead of playing guys like Robin Lopez and Justin Holiday, they've got David Nwamba, who was playing for the Lakers a couple years ago, actually, right? And then Cristiano Felicio.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Not even sure who he is. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to disrespect. I haven't really seen the Bulls play too much this year. But that is just playing even more into my point that the Bulls really are playing guys who aren't really household names, and they're more or less rookies or guys that sit on the bench a lot. So it's kind of a I don't really know who's going to win in this argument. I mean, I do know the NBA will ultimately win because they once again have the power, like we've been talking about so much on this episode, the power to basically do whatever they want. But if you're the Bulls, you sit here and say, hey, listen, we don't want a mediocre draft pick. We want a top draft pick. So go ahead and find us and do what you need to do. But we're going to continue to play our rookies. Nick, do you care that Kawhi Leonard is possibly returning to the Spurs soon?
I do care because that obviously would really help the Spurs for the playoffs. From what I've heard, really the whole season is that Kawhi probably wasn't going to come back this year. I'm a big fan of Kawhi Leonard. I watched him at San Diego State. I enjoyed him playing there. Didn't think he'd turn into what he is in the NBA, which I think he's a top 5 player, but he has. And just this comes as a surprise to me since, like I said, I thought he wasn't coming back this season. And I do think this puts the Spurs a little higher in the conversation to potentially be in the finals if they have Kawhi, because Kawhi can will himself, I believe, into a finals if he's playing at top notch. That creates that kind of fourth team in the West, along with the Thunder, Rockets, and the Warriors, to potentially get into at least the Western Conference Finals and then possibly the finals. So that's going to be a big deal if he comes back, and hopefully he does, because Kawhi's a good guy. And I don't really know what they've been doing. They've been treating him real weirdly over in San Antonio this year. Jared, do you care that the NCAA conference tournaments are underway right now?
That's a big I do care. I am all over these conference championships. If I'm correct, the winner of each conference gets an automatic bid into the tournament, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then obviously if you're a ranked team, you're more than likely going to get in. So this is really the time, if you're looking to fill out a bracket, when you want to watch these championships games, because leagues like the American Conference, with SMU and the American East with Vermont, like all these random teams that don't get the national spotlight all the time. When you're filling out a bracket, these teams are going to be in the tournament, and obviously they're going to be 14, 15, 16 seed teams. But you never know. There's never been a 16 seed beating a 1 seed. But when we get into the second and third rounds, upsets can happen all the time. So I'm definitely excited. I know right now the ACC tournament is going on. That started yesterday. So today will be the second round of that. The Big Ten tournament already wrapped up with Michigan taking that. I believe that's back-to-back conference championships.
Yeah, because last year they had that plane crash, remember?
Yeah.
They kind of willed themselves into the tournament.
Right, yeah. So Michigan is the Big Ten winner. The ACC championship is going on right now. So yes, I am very excited, and I cannot wait to fill out my bracket. I know Nick and I will be doing that.
Oh yeah, next week. Yeah.
Yes, we will. Nick, do you care, sticking with basketball, just going to the professional level, Kobe Bryant won the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film?
Yes, I do care, because we've seen a year of a lot of upsets, right? And this is, I believe, another upset. To see Kobe get his name announced at the Oscars, which is such a foreign thing. The Oscars is such a movie star thing. It's not, they don't blend sports well into it, unless they're making a movie about it. And for Kobe Bryant, the 5-time NBA champion, to win an Oscar, it was amazing to me, and it just shows you how hard of a worker he is. But more importantly, and I mean this more importantly, it sparked the debate on whether this Oscar from Kobe now makes him somehow better at basketball than Michael Jordan.
Oh my gosh!
Come on, you've seen the argument. Everybody's seen the argument that now Kobe has 5 championships and an Oscar. And Michael Jordan has 6 championships and 0 Oscars. So there's a debate on whether, I don't even know what really the debate is, to be honest, but it's maybe whether who's the better person. right? I think, to be honest, Kobe winning 5 championships and then winning an Oscar is probably a better thing than Michael Jordan winning just 6 championships, only one more than Kobe. So I think if you had to do a debate whether the more talented person is probably Kobe Bryant, because Michael Jordan has seemingly done nothing as the Charlotte Hornets / Bobcats owner. So maybe if they win a championship, then he vaults ahead. But it's a stupid argument. I don't even know why I brought it up. But yeah, no, very impressive by Kobe that he wins the Oscar, and good for him, because he really did kind of win that Oscar too. It wasn't like he was the inspiration like the Tonya Harding was for that movie I, Tonya. That movie was just made about her. This was a movie that Kobe wrote this poem and had a lot to do with the production of this. So he deserved that Oscar for sure. Jared, do you care that Kevin Love has opened up about his mental health issues recently?
I do care, and I think this is really, really important. Unfortunately, Kevin Love is having to deal with this, but I'm also very happy that he is being open about this and wrote a letter to the Players Tribune, and he attributes basically him coming out and talking about this to DeMar DeRozan, who also said that he suffers from this type of mental illness, whether it's panic attacks or what the case may be. At the end of the day, we think of these athletes a lot of times as indestructible, and they make millions of dollars, so their life is just perfect, and they don't ever have to deal with any stress or anything like that. When in reality, these guys probably deal with more stress than an average human being does. Right, they're in the spotlight 24/7 wherever they go.
Especially in the NBA.
They had millions of dollars. They have people chasing them all day long, and then they have to go out and perform, because when you don't perform, you get scrutinized from every single angle. So these players, these athletes, doesn't matter what sport you're in, they deal with a lot, and especially in today with social media age, they are never ever behind the curtain. They're always out in the spotlight. Very proud and happy that Kevin Love did come out. Hopefully other players will if they are unfortunately dealing with this symptom, they will not be shy about this, and they will go out and seek help, because I was reading it, and Kevin Love said earlier in the season, he after I believe, I forget if it was in the middle of the game or right after the game, he was rushed to the hospital. And he wasn't sure if what was going on, if he had like a shortness of breath, and he wasn't really sure what was going on, so they took him to the hospital, and he said it was caused by a panic attack that just it came on out of nowhere. So this is real, and it's something that these players, DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love, are having to deal with. Yeah, no, it's definitely a big deal, but I'm happy that these guys are coming forward and talking about it, because I'm sure that there are other athletes who are also dealing with this who, for whatever reason or another, have chosen not to come out. So hopefully they can, and hopefully they can seek the help that they need. Nick, final question for you, switching to baseball, and I know you're going to like this one. Do you care that Ichiro is back with the Mariners?
I don't care.
Really?
I just don't think he'll have that big of a role on the team. It's cool that he's going back to Seattle. I feel like this is probably the end of Ichiro. I feel like this is probably his last year, and that's one of the reasons he is signing with Seattle. I don't even honestly know if he'll finish the season, to be honest. What this does do, and this is interesting, and this only came out because the Angels were talking about this, Shohei Ohtani is very excited at the possibility of facing Ichiro in one of these games as a pitcher. So I think I would be excited to watch that matchup, since the Angels do play Seattle, I think it's like 15 or 18 times during the year, because they're in the same division. So there's obviously a great chance that Shohei will pitch in, I'd say, 3 or 4 of those games, that he'll be able to face Ichiro at least once. Ichiro will start occasionally, probably be on the bench. But no, don't necessarily care that he went back, because he's obviously not going to make an impact for them, I don't think. And like I said, I don't even know if he'll finish out the year, but it should be cool. The one thing to look forward to with this Ichiro thing is that possible matchup with Shohei Ohtani, because you don't get to see the Japanese legends in a way kind of face off, and you have the Babe Ruth of Japan facing off probably the best Japanese baseball player, at least in my opinion, ever. So that would be very cool. But no, I don't really care that Ichiro has signed back with the Seattle Mariners. All right, that finishes off the Do You Care segment. We're going to move into next We're going to jump back into the NFL and talk a little bit of the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine is over, so we're going to talk about that, analyze some of the mock drafts that are going on because a couple new ones came out. So dive right back into the NFL to finish off the podcast. And yes, we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast.
Saquon Barkley at a 2018 Scouting Combine getting set to run his first 40.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
He can run through you. He can run by you. He can jump over you. It's going to be a matchup nightmare for some linebackers that find having to mark him on a Sunday.
Talking about the arc, the comparison of the arc of the football.
Yeah.
Run a track.
Oof. Yeah, that's incredible.
And he's taking
that went from the 10-yard line to the 30, the opposite 30.
You know, at some point, you lose the football as a DB too. So if you can, I know when Randy Moss was with the Vikings, words
that went from the 10-yard line.
He's showing off a little bit.
That was a little show off.
Cover 2 podcast live on OC Rock Radio for our final segment of the show. Nick, you ready to talk a little more football?
I absolutely am.
Let's do it. We're going to dive into the NFL Combine that wrapped up this past weekend in Indianapolis, where a lot of college prospects came out to run the 40, do a lot of broad jump, high jump, measured basically from head to toe, did their position drills, and all 32 NFL teams were in attendance. This is basically just another opportunity for these teams to evaluate these players and also sit down and speak with them on a one-on-one basis to get a better feel of who these players are and where they will be drafted coming up. So Nick, I want to get your thoughts overall on the entire process, and then who stood out to you during the weekend.
Well, Combine was definitely fun to watch this year because I thought we had, obviously with the quarterbacks, it was going to be fun to watch. Really nobody knows where any of these quarterbacks are going to land, which is always a cool thing. You had a couple of years ago, you had Goff and Wentz were going to go 1 and 2, right? That was foreseen. Last year it was a little more predictable, but this year it just seemed nobody knows. I mean, we look at these mock drafts every single time, every single week, and it's different. We got Josh Rosen going to New England now. It's like, no, that's not really. It's just like it just seems like it's so changed. So it's definitely going to be fun to watch those guys. Obviously with the Lamar Jackson storyline too. We talked about that last week. But just to see the stories and the running backs do it too as well. I think the one thing that caught my eye was this Shaquem Griffin. This was such a cool thing to watch. Shaquem Griffin, if you don't know who he is, he's a linebacker from Central Florida, UCF, who had a very, very good team this year. Named themselves the national champions after the season, and so obviously they had a good team. He's a great player, but nobody really thought anything of him. And the interesting thing with him is he doesn't have a left hand. He's missing his left hand, and so he went to do his bench press. And I think was it 20 bench presses or was
20 reps at 225?
Yeah, so 20. Yeah, exactly what Jared just said. Ridiculous.
One hand.
With a prosthetic hand. Yeah, with prosthetic hand.
Unreal.
Ridiculous. So then he goes, you know what? I'll run the 40 too. Yeah, I'll run the 40. Yeah, I'll do this. And remember, guys, as a linebacker, he runs a 4.38. Unreal, right? Can you guys imagine? I mean, I remember 4.3 was like a super foreign thing. Like anybody that had a 4.3 was like really, really fast. Now, in this day and age, with humans becoming freaks of nature every single year, we're getting more and more 4.3s. But to see a linebacker do it at his size, I believe 230 or something like that, it's stupid. It's ridiculous. And then he goes and he runs the cones and does the drills and catches a pass with no prosthetic hand, with just his nub on his left hand, like it's nothing, like he's just a normal, NFL DB. So this guy's they're very inspirational to watch. Obviously, showing that even if you're missing a hand, you can play in the NFL. And this guy definitely upped his draft stock and really impressed me. At least that was, I think, the top thing that I got from that. Plus with the quarterbacks as well.
Oh yeah, no. Listen. Griffin by far was one of the best stories of this combine, and because of what he was able to do without that hand. Looking at his actual draft status and where I think he will go. Before the combine, I think there was kind of still some talk about, all right, how good is his athleticism? What can he really do? I think he was, definitely a day 3 pick, which means he would have been a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yeah.
But I think he could have potentially moved himself up to the 5th round. I still think, unfortunately, obviously there's nothing you can do about this because he only has one hand. That's going to, hamper him and hold him back from being drafted earlier.
Yeah, obviously.
But listen, this guy has a relentless motor. He's going to be a core special teams guy. But obviously he's a fast runner. And I think he will legitimately get an opportunity from a team as like an edge rusher or something like that. Now, I don't think he's going to be able to play in coverage too much because, the chances of him catching balls aren't that great. But, rush the passer, sack the quarterback, core special teams guy. I think he can definitely carve out a career in the NFL and a long one at that. His brother, I forget his brother's first name, but he was drafted. Shaquille, I'm sorry. Was drafted last year by the Seahawks as a cornerback.
Yeah,
so
he had to play a lot, too.
Right, yeah, he did. He really shined for the Seahawks. So Shaquem can, lean on his brother for advice and that type of thing. But he was definitely a standout. Another guy that I didn't really get to watch the combine, unfortunately, but just from kind of hearing tape, Josh Allen, quarterback from Wyoming. Heard he threw the ball like 70 yards in the air and just dropped it on a dime to the receiver.
I think I know what you're talking about, too, because there's a video out there of it. And, dude, it just looks like he's just throwing a pass.
Yeah.
Doesn't look
no
like
effort.
Yeah, it's not like where if I tried to throw a 70-yard pass, it looked like I was having a seizure on the field or something like that, But this guy, let me just throw the ball, rather flick his wrist, boom, there it goes, 70 yards.
Listen, I think he was the one quarterback that really, I guess if you can say, elevated his draft stock because there's mock drafts out there that have him going number 1. So if you can elevate your draft stock in his position, I think he definitely did. All the quarterbacks, they have their own unique way, their unique skill set. Sam Darnold, it's really his IQ of the game. He's a big quarterback, so he can withstand hits and his accuracy. Josh Allen, like we just mentioned, his arm, even though he played in a little less competition playing at Wyoming, I think he would be better to, be lucky enough to sit for a year in the NFL and really study the game a little more. Josh Rosen out of UCLA, I think, is the best pure passer in the game, but he's got some question marks. There's some people out there that are questioning, his level of commitment to playing football and whether he loves the game as much. Baker Mayfield, who a lot of people are comparing to Johnny Manziel because he can obviously run, but he's got that fiery mentality. Can he be a leader? In the locker room and galvanize and bring a team together to win. And obviously Lamar Jackson, really the dual threat quarterback being compared to Michael Vick. Doesn't really have the accuracy. He can throw the ball, that's for dang sure, but doesn't have the accuracy or the touch that you would really like for a quarterback in the NFL. So, I think there's 5 quarterbacks that can go in the first round. Fortunately, we got to see 4 of them throw. Sam Darnold did not throw at the pro day, and I think we talked last week that I was a little disappointed that he didn't. Not really sure still why he did not. I think he should have competed. So his only opportunity to impress the scouts for the last time will be at his USC pro day. But for the quarterbacks, I think that is what I was most interested to see, just because obviously, as you know, in the NFL, you don't have a quarterback, you're not winning games.
Well, and here's another guy that impressed. Not a quarterback, but an offensive player. Saquon Barkley.
And come on.
Well, now, yeah, but now it started the whole the rounds on all the sports shows talking about should the Browns take him at number 1. So I thought we should debate this. Like I said, we're not going to be able to talk about football for about 3 weeks, so we should debate this. Is there a chance Saquon Barkley goes number 1 after his combine? Because I thought his combine obviously was very good.
Oh no, it wasn't very good. It was fantastic. It was one of the best combines I've ever seen.
I don't know the levels of the word because we got good, very good, obviously fantastic.
Yeah, he was spectacular.
Okay, so he was spectacular too. Okay, so I thought it was very good, and when I mean very good, I'm putting him at the top, the highest level too.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
I don't think though that Cleveland should pick him number one. Okay, I get that the league somewhat is actually becoming a running back league in a way. You see a lot of these teams. You look at your Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott. Clearly, the Cowboys needed him last year. Okay, as much as you don't want to say it.
I know. Yeah, no, I'm not doubting that.
You just gave me a look, but they needed him last year, and I think the Steelers they need a Le'Veon Bell, and the Cardinals clearly needed David Johnson last year. So there's the argument to make that maybe the Browns start their franchise with a star running back and try to pick one of the quarterbacks a little later. I disagree with that, though, because I think these quarterbacks are a little different than the ones that have come out the last couple of years. Obviously, the Browns probably could have picked Carson Wentz when they had him. They ended up trading. They traded their pick, I believe it was to the Rams that year. And was it the Rams that they traded for? I forget. Who did the Rams trade for the number one pick?
I think it... Ooh, I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah, well, okay. Nonetheless, obviously you'd want a Carson Wentz or a Jared Goff, but they didn't get him. But I do think the quarterbacks this year are better than the ones last year. I believe that if you were to draft one of the guys like Rosen or Darnold or Allen who impressed, I agree with you on that. He impressed, or even the Baker Mayfield. I think that's better safe as number one. And then if Barkley falls to number 4, you pick him up too. Because I don't think they really need to add much on defense. But I think you take the risk on losing out on Barkley compared to losing out on a QB because the Browns have just had so much bad luck. They're not comparable to other teams with the whole running back league thing. I think they just need to find their QB, worry about the running back later in the draft or in free agency or something like that. I think they should pick a quarterback. Jared, what about you? What do you think about Barkley possibly being the number one pick?
Yeah, no, if you're the Browns, listen, you need help at almost every position. So if they are going into this draft with the number one pick and not at least talking about taking Saquon Barkley, who in my opinion is the best overall player in the draft, then I think the Browns are not doing their own due diligence. I think it would be stupid of them not to at least take a look at Saquon Barkley. I still think that they need to go quarterback because quarterback is the top position in the National Football League, and I think if they're not going to get Kirk Cousins, so unless they want to I guess I don't want to say settle for a Case Keenum, or if they want to stick with DeShone Kizer, which I hope they don't. But if that's their thinking, then yes, you go with Saquon Barkley number one. I personally think they're going to pick a quarterback, whether that be Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, or Josh Rosen. I think one of those three guys will be the first pick. And let's not forget, they do have that fourth pick as well. So I don't think Saquon Barkley would last till that fourth pick because I think who's ahead of him? The Colts and the Giants.
Yeah.
I'm praying that the Giants don't take Saquon Barkley for
who do you want the Giants to pick?
I want them to trade out and not take anyone because listen, they're going to get a really good player regardless of whether they take Saquon Barkley or a quarterback. Either way, you're picking that high, you're going to get a really, really good player. So for the Browns, take a quarterback. You have your other pick at number 4. For Saquon Barkley, though, listen, it would not surprise me if he went number 1 because of his talent. Running backs like this do not come every single year. There are a lot of good running backs in this class that are going to come out. Sony Mitchell, Nick Chubb, the list goes on. It is a very deep running back class. But Barkley is special. He does all 3 phases. He's already drawn comparisons to Ezekiel Elliott and Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. So you have the opportunity to get a unique running back like that. Unless there's a quarterback ahead of him, which there are, then I would not be surprised to see the Browns go up and get Barkley.
Yeah, he obviously ran I think it was like a 4.4 or whatever in the draft. Man, did you see him run the cones though?
Oh. The kid's a freak.
It's a freak. It's ridiculous. What I urge you to go watch the running backs run the cones because it's really like you see what kind of different human beings those kind of guys are, and they really separate themselves from the pack. But especially Saquon Barkley, man, a guy that big just running that fast. We talk about obviously Shaquem Griffin doing what he did. Saquon Barkley's around the same size as Shaquem Griffin, and it's ridiculous. It's fun to watch. But so I think we both agree the Browns should pick a quarterback. But you were saying that you think the Browns could pick Saquon Barkley.
Yes, okay. I think that's very much in the running.
I don't think they'll even pick him. I think they're too.
I'm not saying they will. I'm just thinking they need to at least assess the situation and not just be tunnel vision with just the quarterback.
That's fair.
That's fair. Going back really quickly, it was the Titans that the Rams traded with, and the Rams gave up the house. Because the Titans
it kind of worked, though.
It did. The Titans had 6 picks in the first 2 rounds, so it worked out for both teams.
They gave up a lot. They gave a lot for Marcus Peters, too.
They did, yeah. But it was the Titans that the Rams traded with.
That's good. I like that. As an NFC West fan, I like to see the Rams wasting all of their draft picks away on 2 guys, right? But, they're good.
Worked for him last year.
So let's dive back into the quarterbacks, though, and I want to play a little game here. So I think we both believe Lamar Jackson will be out of those 5 we've named, the last one picked.
Yes.
So we'll just leave him off of this. So we'll do this. We'll each draft our 4 of those. So the 4 quarterbacks. You got Darnold, Rosen, Allen, and Mayfield. So we're going to pick 1 through 4 where we think those guys are going to go. You pick the team and you pick how early it's going to be. So let's go with the 4 guys. Jared, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You take it.
Okay, I'll go first. So I'll start with we'll start with earlier. So we'll go 1 through 4. I think Sam Darnold's going to be number 1 to the Browns. I think he's going to go to the Browns. We've been talking about quarterbacks a lot. I think he's the guy that everyone kind of thinks has the most intangibles to be at quarterback. I think a lot of people, obviously, the thing was Rosen versus Darnold the whole season. I think you saw, obviously, USC getting to the Cotton Bowl and all that, and then and UCLA was barely made it into a bowl. So although Rosen was hurt, it kind of seemed like Darnold had the more tangible. So I think Darnold goes number 1 to the Browns. Then I think we jump to number 5 and the Broncos, and I think the Broncos take Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen, with his recent show at the draft, I think that upped him enough for the Broncos to want to pick him. We already said that we thought Kirk Cousins would go to the Vikings, so the Broncos will need a quarterback. They'll go with the best one in the draft, and I think it will be Allen. Next, and this is where it gets interesting. I think it's going to be Rosen. I'm not sure exactly which team it's going to be. I'm just trying to think of you have the draft order right there. You know what? Okay, I'll go with this. I think he goes to the Jets, number 6, because we did just say that Kirk Cousins is not going to go. He's going to go to the Vikings. So I'll go Rosen to New York. I think a lot of people were already picking that because everyone assumed the Jets would end up with the number 1 or 2 or 3 pick. So I think somehow he still ends up with the Jets. That also has me obviously skipping the Giants and all those teams and stuff, picking quarterbacks. I think the Giants stick with Eli Manning. That's why I said that one New York team would not pick him. But I think ultimately Josh Rosen ends up in New York after seeing draft order. And then I think the last one picked is Baker Mayfield. And I think that's going to be by the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Cardinals will have to pick a quarterback. They may have to trade up. I believe that's what they'll have to do, especially if what I'm saying happens, the first 3 quarterbacks going 1 through 6. I think the Cardinals trade up, get Baker Mayfield, knowing they haven't got Kirk Cousins. I think they still could sign a free agent quarterback, though, because I think Baker Mayfield you might not want to necessarily have being your starting quarterback, but I do believe the Cardinals jump up to Baker Mayfield, so I go Darnold gets picked first, Allen second, Rosen third, and then Baker Mayfield. So how about you, Jared?
All right, I'm going to agree with you on the first overall pick. I think the Browns do take Sam Darnold. In my opinion, I think he is the best complete quarterback to come out in this draft. Yes, he had some interception issues last year in his final year at USC, but I think overall his football IQ, his size, his measurables, everything, I think he would be the ideal quarterback for the Browns, and I think they just might finally have a quarterback of their future. Go. I know it's been a while, but I think they might find one in Sam Darnold. I think the Giants at number 2 take Josh Rosen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they take Rosen, and I think they do it for two reasons. One, I think they let Rosen sit, obviously, behind Eli Manning for 1 year. Two, I think Rosen has the moxie and the attitude to handle New York. New York's obviously a big market, and they're very brutal, right? They don't mess around over there. So I think Rosen, I think he can deal with the ups and downs that are going to come from being a New York Giants quarterback. Number 3, I have Josh Allen going to the Broncos.
Oh, okay. It's the same thing.
He's got a big arm, obviously, as he showed off at the NFL Combine. The Broncos need a quarterback. Paxton Lynch hasn't worked out so far. Trevor Siemian, in my opinion, is more of just a bridge guy. Playing in that high altitude. I think Josh Allen would do really well. Playing with that Denver Broncos defense. The only issue I have with Allen is I'm not so sure that I would want to start him day one. So I could see the Broncos either sticking with Siemian as a bridge guy and letting Allen sit for a year, or bringing in a Case Keenum or something like that. I really like Allen, but I think more or less because of the where he played at Wyoming, I want to give him a little bit more time. I'm not. I don't think.
Well, I mean, Carson Wentz played in North Dakota State, though.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I'm just the total accuracy. I'm a little worried about. If you go back and look at his tape, there's obviously throws. The long, deep Hail Mary passes where he's on point. But some of the intermediate throws, his accuracy is a little off. So if he can go to the Broncos and sit for a year, I think they might have found a guy. Right after that, number 6. Both New York teams are taking quarterbacks. The Jets are taking Mayfield. Mayfield, another fiery guy that I think can handle that New York pressure. He's going to have to start from day one. I think he's starting day one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think you're having 4 quarterbacks go with the first 6 in the first 6 picks.
I don't think that's ever happened, has it?
I'm not sure if it has. I wouldn't be surprised, but I know it hasn't happened in a very long time.
Yeah. Oh man,
with the quarterbacks are flying off the shelves.
And we thought last year, as we watched it together, that the quarterbacks were kind of going super early.
Yep.
Man, that'd be crazy.
Flying off the shelves, and you know what that means? That's good for other teams that don't need quarterbacks, because then that means the other top tier talents like the Bradley Chubbs, the defensive end,
some good linemen coming out too.
Right. That means all those other star athletes are just coming down. Then what's going to happen is, you go to the Miami Dolphins sitting at number 11, the Cincinnati Bengals sitting at number 12, your Arizona Cardinals sitting at 15, who all need quarterbacks. They're going to be all going after Lamar Jackson, right? So do one of those teams move up and trade with, let's say, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Chicago Bears or the 49ers, who none of those teams need quarterbacks. So then it's going to be a trade up, and it's going to be a race. Who wants them?
Cardinals, after just they got the compensation picks, they got a 3rd and a 4th, so they have the ammo to trade up too. Okay. So Cardinals do it if you have to.
Actually, this year is the first year that the compensatory picks will be able to be used as trade value. Before, in years past,
I didn't even know that.
The NFL would hand out those compensatory picks, but you wouldn't be able to trade those. You had to keep them. This year, you can move them around, so that just gives teams more ammo. Well,
you could still do what I'm saying with the compensatory picks with the Cardinals. You could just trade the other 3rd or 4th.
Right. Yeah, now I'm saying you can package them all together, so it just gives teams more ammo.
It's helping the Cardinals out. The NFL's for the Cardinals. I'm just kidding.
Oh, boy.
But so, unfortunately, we've ran out of time kind of for the NFL stuff. We had a good segment. But so let's move on to our final thoughts of the day. I will go first. My final thought is going to be very local, very personal thing to me. I went to a big-time high school basketball game. I believe, what day was it? I believe it was last Friday or Saturday. It doesn't matter. It was the CIF Southern Section final at the Pyramid, the Walter Pyramid at Long Beach State. Real cool place to watch. Mater Dei versus Sierra Canyon, star-studded event. Obviously, Mater Dei is always good at basketball every single year. But Sierra Canyon had Scottie Pippen Jr. and KJ Martin, Kenyon Martin's son. So they were both there in attendance. I watched the game. I just want to give a shout out to Mater Dei and a longtime friend, Aiden Prukop, for winning a CIF championship. They ended up beating Sierra Canyon. Crazy play at the end. Sierra Canyon had a couple chances to make a shot. They did not. So Mater Dei wins the Southern Section title. Crazy stat, though. This is their 23rd CIF Southern Section title for Gary McKnight.
Wow.
The coach. It's insane. And I believe they've won the Trinity League, which is their division, over 30 times. So Gary McKnight, legendary coach, said just shout out to Mater Dei and Aiden Prukop for that win. Very fun game to watch, very good atmosphere. And it was obviously cool to see the stars there. Scottie Pippen was there. Kendall Martin was there to see the game too. So very cool, very cool. Just want to give a shout out to
Mater Dei. Never disappoints with their
and
stars.
They're moving on to the state championship where all those teams will face each other again too.
Oh boy.
So yeah.
I've actually got some breaking news, and this affects my Cowboys in a certain way, but unfortunately in a bad way. The Seattle Seahawks are trading Michael Bennett to the Eagles.
Oh!
The Super Bowl champion Eagles just got even better.
Who'd they trade for him, though?
I'm not really sure what they gave up. This is just breaking news.
I'm going to have to say
press.
that I'm not super disappointed about that trade.
I know you're not, because now he's out of the NFC West, moving to the NFC East.
Some good final thoughts for me.
Yeah. No, so breaking news, Michael Bennett is taking his talents to the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles because they needed even more help.
On the defensive line, too?
Right.
That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe we, as NFC fans, we should watch out for that. We're not thinking of that.
So my final thought is Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, that O-line better do a lot better than it did last year, because the Eagles are only getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear the music right there, and the Sandman is playing. That means it's the end of the podcast, the end of a normal podcast for 3 weeks. Next week, remember, March Madness predictions. Pretty much most of the show is going to be about that. So if you're looking for who you think we should talk about with the predictions, watch or listen to the podcast, which is going to be cool next week. We're going to go dive all into it. We kind of screwed up last year. We wanted to do it last year, but we weren't able, just because we weren't together to do the podcast. We weren't able to do it, but we're going to do it this year in the studio live. So listen on OC Rock Radio. But for Nick Nenad,
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast.